Recording is on.
This is design jam number something for the Bitcoin Core app project. And today we're going to discuss future plans for the direction of V2.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro. Let me share a Google Doc that I put together with release/feature outline. Just going to copy the link. I'll share it here in the docs. So this is actually something I wanted to discuss with Harold and get his input on. I don't think he's had a chance yet because he's in Oslo right now. But I was basically just, we have the milestone 1, right? That's kind of done. Then we have milestone 1.1, which is this polish thing. And then I put on milestone 1.x that we refit in everything, like CMake or whatever releases there are. We'll have to figure that out. And then 2, I basically called it the replace QT milestone. That's where we figure out what the minimum is to do that replacement. And then we spec that out very, very tightly. And then we just try to work towards that. And I would assume that some of the other stuff, it falls into place working backwards. And we should also make some really tight calls on things like whether we want to have a console or an explorer. These kind of designs have been floating around, ideas have been floating around, but ideally it's not like I implement it because I just want to right now. It is because we have a plan and we decided on things. Here's Harold. Let's see if the connection's good enough.
Harold is here.
You might be in listening mode more than
yeah. Okay, Harold, so I just shared a Google Doc here in the chat. Maybe you can pull that up if you can't chime in. Done. Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, so I think we should really just tighten this up. And the other thing that I did was, let me share this Figma link here as well. I try to create a very simplified top-level view of the application that we can talk through. So we all have the same thing in mind. But I wanted to first ask everyone else, like, how would you, moving forward, how do you want to be involved? Do you have any thoughts in the project planning and all of this stuff? Unfortunately, Harold can't be in here and Hibasco's not there, but I think it's still worth a conversation.
Well, this list is really good, by the way. I think it's close. And obviously, there's a lot of opportunity for Milestone 2.
Yeah. So I'll just go over this wireframe here because I tried to visualize. These are all the screens that we have right now. So it's a very, very linear sequence from left to right, basically. You start the application, you see the cover, you can go to about and developer options if you want. Otherwise, we take you through this linear sequence with 1 or 2 deep dives here. And then you're at the block log, you can go to settings, and you have all these subpages. And that's it, right? The block log is the experience. And then if we go to version 2, all the screens, all the new screens that I added here have a little star in the corner. I think it's, I don't know, 25 new screens or so. So similarly, we start with and this needs some revision, of course, as we go. But basically, in onboarding, we now also have feature info about wallet. Then we might have setup wallet functionality, flows in here, create an import. Then we no longer end up at the block log, but in the main application, we have kind of, I guess, 5 parallel tabs. We have the activity, we have the send, we have the receive, the node, and we have the settings. And you can navigate between them. You're not stuck in one central place, but you have tabs or something like that. And then each of those has its sub things. On the activity, you can go and see transaction details. If you're in send, you might have a confirm modal. You can see all the addresses you've used. You can open up a URL that you copied somewhere, and coin selection. And in receive, you generate an invoice. You might have a separate screen that shows that, and you can see all the addresses you've used. Block log probably doesn't change much. And then in settings, we might have the peer subscreen, wallet settings and wallet backup, sign and verify message in the console. And then 2 extra flows for creating and importing. And I think that's kind of it. That should be a top level map of where we are and where we might be heading to.
Yeah, that's great. Trying to load it up myself.
And in terms of the process sorry, just one more thing, Yashrash, in terms of the process of getting there, we already did a whole bunch of exploration. One simple step could be, we just kind of do an imitate, where we take our new style and recreate all of those screens with the new style, but we don't change the UX. We see what issues or areas for improvement come up. And then we do a second iteration where we try to tackle those and just make things a little bit smoother, easier, better, address issues that have been brought up over the years, and just do this level of polish. And we could either split up individual designers, groups, try to tackle individual features, or we could just do them all together, maybe with everyone chips in, but there's one lead who puts things together. The final composition, I guess. There are a few ways we can do it. But okay, Yashrash, what's up?
Yeah, so I just saw this Figma, right? So that looks amazing. That looks like I should be digging into that, before I say too much. But I just felt like I was reading about your like discussions with the maintainers, and they said like, yeah, when can we replace, when can we replace QT with QML, and you suggested like that as a milestone. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the idea of it. I just feel like that might be kind of a minefield, because like I think it might involve like big like code-based changes, right, to the main repo. And like, how PRs get stuck for years, and this will be a huge PR or a set of like a dozen PRs or so, right? I mean, just the review and the merging process could take like a year, right? I just felt like I just felt like it could be like a big quagmire, or maybe not, and I'm totally wrong, which I would love if that's the case. But I just thought like that might be a concern. Uh,
Yeah.
another thought, yeah. So I just uh, put out the other one, and I'd love to hear what like everyone thinks about this. The other one was like, I felt like the idea of a QT parity and like maybe replacement and like whatever we are talking about, like that seemed to me a bit like an engineering milestone, and maybe not like user centric, because like I think the idea is to not just like replace it, or maybe it is, and maybe we need to talk about more like high level stuff. But I mean, is that aim to like improve the UX, like just to fix it or just to make it look modern? I mean, what's the goal here?
Yeah,
Because
very good
yeah,
question. So to your point about this being an engineering milestone, so yes and no. I think there's also the fact that people have used this for 10 years. Whenever they install this next version that comes with a new UI, they kind of expect that it still works in the way that they've been using it. Ideally better, right? It feels, on the one hand, it feels familiar, but on the other hand, it's a nice step forward, which is a tricky thing to pull off. But
Yeah.
it would be a shame if there were some use cases that we just completely cut off, right? So I don't think there's a very simple answer here. I think that requires some very thorough collaboration. But ideally, we can find a good balance between all of that. And as you mentioned, the first thing you said about that it's a huge code change. I think the maintainers are aware and open. They're okay with that. And it definitely does impact some of the decisions we're making. But I think that's why we also need to very closely work with them and keep them in tune, and also be very clear about our plans. Let's say we come up with a plan for the next half year or year. We communicate the designs very clearly, so everyone has a chance to be prepared for what's coming and give feedback and help us adjust course if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I want to let Art jump in, but just like one final thing about that. I think I agree with it. I love everything what you just said. I think like I don't think we will like ever replace anything, right? Because I mean, you are like supposed to have access to all the old releases of Bitcoin Core anyway. So the legacy UI will always be there, right? Someone can go back and install Bitcoin Core 0.10, right? And that will obviously have the old UI.
Yeah.
Or they might expect it to, like, somebody might be like, hey, I don't trust the new UI. I'm not sure if it's properly implemented yet. I just want to stick to the old ones, and we don't push any changes. So you say, yeah, you can have the old one as well, I guess,
Yeah, I think Luke Dash Jr. maintains a fork with some certain changes and features that he prefers. And as a person very close to the project, it's something that he can do. But yeah, I mean, we just need to put this stuff out there. Hopefully everyone's on board, gives us the feedback, and then everyone's happy with it. But it could go differently as well. Hopefully it doesn't.
Hi, Art.
Yeah.
You raise your hand. You're muted still.
Hi, friends, and great to be here. I'm a fly on the wall. I'm just coming here to listen and really learn. I think there's probably nothing more important than this project in Bitcoin. The more I think about it, right? So I felt compelled to hang out with you. And one thing that I'm noticing from like a product and strategy point of view, just as an outsider, is I'm not hearing consensus on what you're looking to accomplish and the change you're seeking to accomplish together, right? Like what I noticed is you hopped right into, here are the designs that we've built, here are the projects that we built. And what I'm curious about, and maybe this is implicit, and that's totally cool, is how do we know we're successful, right? One thing that I heard in response to Yashraj is that users of previous UIs need to feel comfortable with any changes to future design implementations. Like that to me is a minimum viable requirement. Do you know what I mean? I'm curious what other requirements might need to live there, and they might already all exist in another document. So I just wanted to flag that.
It's interesting. I'll challenge that point a little bit about the previous users need to be comfortable with it. I think there are times where you need to make a change, and I think it's up to us to decide whether that's necessary. And I think, sometimes, I have to word this correctly. Sometimes I've been in situations in other projects where I felt like there was no point in, like, I come into some other project as a freelancer or something, and people talk about user testing or so, or user research, getting feedback. I'm like, there's no point. This is such an obviously crappy thing. People are just going to say it's crappy, right? At some point, it's good to just put your best step forward and try to do something really, really good, because the the old project is not necessarily, it has gone sideways, or it wasn't executed professionally, or it was grown out of, like some culture, or like there were no designers or something like that, where it's like, it's gone so sideways that you can't really use that as a really good foundation for moving forward. And I think that's another, I'm being careful here with all of my statements, because I think we all need to discuss and figure out as a group and figure out the consensus and hive mind direction on this stuff. But I also want us to have a good pace, right? So we can keep moving forward.
I second wanting to have a good pace, and also second wanting to have more structure. If you say more structure, I'm 500% on board with having more structure. I feel we definitely need that to kind of move forward at a good pace. So whatever works for all of us together to move at that pace in terms of managing it, or deciding and seeing what's kind of holding us back from moving forward would be great.
Yeah, I'm pulling up another slide here from my presentation. And, this is another big thing. So basically, it's never worked on Android before. Now it does. 1 billion Android devices are sold per year. So this now works on mobile, which has never been done before, or it couldn't work on that before. And now we have several billion people that could potentially use this in new ways, in different ways. So we have to realign, readjust, and reconfigure. But yeah, I think just keeping it very practical and making prototypes, putting in front of people, getting feedback continuously from the people who work on it, from all kinds of other people. I rely on that.
Let me ask one more question from an outsider and ignorant point of view, which is, what are markers of success for this product and project? Is it up funnel, more downloads, so more people are able to go through the download and installation flow? Is it more people keep the product running? Is it once the product is on people's devices, people are satisfied and understand what's happening? Do you know what I mean? So I'm curious, where along the life cycle of Bitcoin Core we're looking to intervene most aggressively?
Yeah, how about everyone? What do you think? Let's throw out some ideas for that.
Yeah, so I'll add a couple just from a pure technical side. There's the design factors, but there's also it needs to be easier to maintain than the current GUI, and that's kind of a harder one. That's kind of hard to measure. There are ways to measure that, though, but you do bring up a good point, because we should think about that, because we'll need it to convince people to switch over. But the framework we're using is more modern and far more flexible than the old one used. So there's technical reasons, and then the Android one's a good one. It allows us to support different interface types. So those are two of the strong technical reasons why we're doing this.
Another reason from the design side is that we have the opportunity to build a really amazing design foundation. That's why you have a design documentation website, and you have all these specs and all of this stuff. So ideally for the future, this creates, it's not just technical maintenance, it's also design maintenance, and having a stronger foundation for implementing new features, hardware wallets, multi-sig, all of this stuff. Just say design foundation, which then should also increase the product development lifecycle. All of those things together, right? To your point about more people using it, there's no tracking. There will be no tracking. But I do hope a little bit and this is kind of a separate task. If we can also, and the maintainers also mentioned this a little bit, that the download pages are not ideal, that they're interested in improving the feedback mechanisms also, that we can actually get more clarity about who uses it and how use it without the invasive tracking. So I would love at the end of all of this to also be more knowledgeable about how people use it, because some people have tried to figure out who uses it how, and people just don't want to share it. It's very tricky. It's intentionally also kind of tricky, but I do hope that this is a goal we can achieve.
Yeah, sure. You had a comment?
Yeah. So I mean, I love seeing that on like Christoph's background, like what are the goals, right? Because I think I have like talked to him about that. Because um, I think that uh, I suspect, I'm not sure about anything. I suspect that like we might have a bit of a like a tough situation here in terms of who our customers are, and like because I feel like the reason we are talking about Android is that we want to have billions of more people who should be using this, right? But I have also listened to podcasts with many Bitcoin Core contributors and some maintainers, and they felt like Bitcoin Core is for people who want to do like the advanced, like who want to do who want to do everything that's possible with the Bitcoin protocol, right? And so in a way, I heard some Bitcoin Core contributors and maintainers say that like Bitcoin Core has almost evolved to be for the developers because they, they are the super users. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but does that sound like a fair assessment?
No, I
Or
would disagree with that. I don't think any developer uses the GUI.
Andrew Chia does.
I don't think there's zero developers that use the GUI.
I asked Andrew
Actually,
Chia.
well,
Sorry,
well,
I asked
maybe-
Andrew, and I asked him like, why do you care about it? And he said, well, because I use it. And he said something interesting. I asked him, well, why? What do you use it for? And he said to generate like some basic stuff like generating addresses. And I asked him why that, and he said because it feels more trustworthy to do that in a UI, and it feels a bit more scary to make mistakes in the command line. So it was very interesting. I think if we can actually succeed at making things feel more trustworthy to do in the UI, then that's a good step forward.
That's a really funny comment coming from a developer, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
I've never heard a developer ever say they want to use the GUI over a command line. But
I mean, I
some-
think Johnny said something actually really really revealing, right? It's like, why do the developers themselves don't use the UI? I mean, like that should be like goal almost, right? I mean, the developers don't use the
no,
UI, like
as a developer, we don't use UIs.
Yeah, think about it as layers of abstraction.
Yeah,
right?
right.
The UI is another layer of abstraction for different
More
people.
things to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, it's like command line. For a developer, UI might be the afterthought. For me, command line is the afterthought. And like,
Right.
there's also a command line that you can use, but why would I ever want to use that? Right? It almost doesn't exist.
The real ultimate goal of this, though, is that I would hope that Bitcoin Core's GUI is in the conversation with Sparrow or Electrum or any of the number of or Blue Wallet, whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be as good as those, but at least be in the conversation of like, if someone's going to start self custody, they can recommend the Core wallet again. Because I haven't heard anyone recommend the Core wallet for self custody in years.
I mean, it's true. There are various wrapper projects in a way that just wrap this to add some different UI.
Yeah, everyone recommends Sparrow, which is great, but it's more complexity for a user.
So
I haven't heard anyone recommend the Bitcoin Core GUI.
I have another question as well, which just came to mind is how do you think would be, because Christoph mentioned that there's now an additional 21 screens that would have to be developed to move on to, I'm just seeing here, is it called Milestone? Will that be Milestone 1X? Milestone 2, replace QT. The minimum feature set we need for parity with the QT wallet. Okay, it can be removed and the new application can take its place. So that's 21 more screens, which would move into development as well. Yeah, here, Christoph has it here in front of him. These will be all the screens. So
But yeah, sorry.
how would we keep track of, because I'm still coming back to the user feedback, the user test that we did in the beginning with the installation process. It was a little bit glitchy in the beginning. I think we tested out 2 Mac users. So I'm just thinking in terms of that installation process, which is quite a big one, and how can we tackle that one? Is it, I mean, I can help out in terms of writing some FAQs or some type of, I don't know, anything.
So I think that there are some parts to this, and I didn't. That one part I didn't put it in here, but it was in my mind, and that is the application startup.
Yeah.
That all the different scenarios with all the different settings and states and whatever the user has done in history, that those are very smoothly solved, and the core wallet can be run with all kinds of commands as well, and we should. This is something where we need to kind of closely collaborate with developers to figure out in which configuration this thing can be started, and then how the UI should respond. I think that's an important, and there might be some things where we just have to come up with a screen to tell people like, sorry, this is not working. Change stuff, or we're going to ignore your settings or something like that. But that is something important to figure out.
Yeah, I'll make a note to I'll go through the user feedback of the initial tests that we did. I know that installation process, there were quite some notes in terms of people already having the GUI installed, those kinds of things. But I think I like this outline that Christoph put together in terms of what screens actually need to be created, because we can really focus on what needs to be done and keep on creating those screens, and then ideally have design ahead of development. And from my mind as well, I feel like there's still some other low hanging fruit in terms of the error messages as well, which I did some user testing on.
Yeah, I only focused here on the big new stuff. Really.
Yeah.
They're along with the polish tasks, we'll have smaller stuff happening at the same time.
I feel like I could add a whole bunch to the polishing stuff, in terms of the installation and the error messages. So if we have somewhere we could bucket all those those little things that are just hanging around.
Yeah, I think we need to have several tracks. One is our big goal. Where do we want to be? Milestone 2, and then the sub goals, milestone 1.234 with CMake or whatever stuff happening, and then we have the parallel track where we continuously improve on things based on feedback.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the design and development process is another thing. Ideally, design's always, we kind of set our goals, the big milestone, we all figure that out together, we decide on it, we figure out our sub-milestones, we figure out what's next, and then design should be ahead of development by a good amount. So, and not just design in isolation, but as a conversation, it's planning. And then once development starts on that, it's basically everyone knows exactly how it's going to react, what it's going to work, what will not be involved, and all that. And then implementation is not thinking about how it's going to work anymore, but just implementing the stuff that everyone's agreed upon. And that's already spec'd out, so that's ideal. But I think Harold is another important part of that conversation here.
Did you have a comment, Art? Oh, Yash?
All good. Thank you.
Yeah. Um. I feel like, and like, I would really like to hear what people think about what I'm saying, because I don't know if it makes sense. Like, I'm just trying to test if like people feel the same way or they feel like in a different way. I just feel like I don't know who the customers are. So how am I supposed to know if it's like if it's going in the right direction or not going in the right direction? Is it a reference implementation for the UI as well, is it for or is it for a farmer in South America who wants to, who wants to be on the Bitcoin standard and he wants to use his Android phone to do it? Like
So
that's a completely different user base, right?
can I,
So how do you
I understand that that's an important question, but I feel like we've discussed that a few times and we're talking about something else here. Can we maybe just have a dedicated session just for that and then do a write-up that comes out of it? Because that's not a question that should come up over and over again. That's something that we should put in our design docs or project docs or so. But today was more specifically about the design planning and how we can move forward with our milestones and all of that. It's an important conversation, but I prefer to not have it right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, is that okay?
So where do we start here then for
Yeah. How could we put this really practically speaking in, like, I don't know, project management board, or like what's gonna work for us to collaborate?
So I would suggest. So I put that Google Doc there, right? And you have full editing access. I think it'd be amazing if all of you could put questions in there, make comments from technical side, from design side about those milestones. Harold is until tomorrow. He's traveling. Then he'll be available. I'll also expect him. Maybe Hebasto has a few things to put in there as well, like coming up with sub milestones around CMake, or I don't really know what's involved there, or all these other things. And then that stuff will take shape with all of our input. Then we kind of have these milestones. And then I'd like to organize a design process around that. I think we should, for this 1.1 polish thing, we should specifically say what's in there, what isn't, and we should create GitHub issues for each of those. In GitHub, you can use milestones to group them, and we can create a project. But it's basically what we have for the design guide. Those BTC Pay uses. That's a good pattern that we can use there. So we all decide this is milestone 1, and ideally we could also spec out a little bit about what our time estimate is, and that should involve time for personal travels and sickness and other type of stuff, and be realistic. And it can be rough, right? So I would like to ideally spec out that QT replacement milestone, because I think we can get to a good point there because it's a very specific goal. And maybe the other 1.1 polish, I think we can also very specifically decide. And then maybe 1.2 or 1.3, whatever we're going to have there. That's more up for debate. And then set up the milestones in GitHub, set up those issues, put them in there, and then have another discussion around practically who wants to do what, and like for 1.1, like what's needed from the design side. I don't even know. I would then try to focus the design deliverables first on the 1.1 milestone, and once that's done, then start working towards the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have a CMake milestone, whatever that may involve, it might not need any design, right? But then start focusing on the big one, which is the QT parity one, and systematically work through all of those screens. Which it sounds like a lot of screens, but I don't think it will be that crazy. There's probably at least half of them that we simply use screen templates we already have.
Yeah.
And with minor tweaks.
It would look like a project board on GitHub, similar to like what we have for the design guide, and we pretty much have milestone 1x is what we've worked on now. Oh no, sorry, milestone 1.1 is in progress, and then we add in 1x milestone 2. So we pretty much have, and then we have 2x and that's pretty much where it would go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get better at this. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to set up aside a day every week or every month to just go all of the roadmaps and stuff for all the projects that I'm involved in. I'm gonna try to be.
It's very tough, Christoph, to maintain several projects at different
Yeah.
stages all at the same time. So A+ to you.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Wish me luck. But yeah, I mean, everyone's of course happy, open to chip in, but we kind of need to have a little bit of a consistent pace, and it helps when someone makes it happen and the others can be more focused on their tasks and on their things. I mean, it's great if everyone wants to be part of it, but I mean, practically, usually that's not the case.
Yeah.
And on the technical side, I'll really rely on Johnny, Harold, Hibasto to set the pace for that, because this stuff is so complex, and there's all these externalities with a larger project that I cannot really estimate anything in there or be part of many of those conversations.
I do feel like the milestones that we use for the guide always helps us to come back to the same conversation each time, because they're always right
Yeah.
in front of you. So I do think that that's a nice kind of starting point when we have conversations. It's like, we're on this milestone now. Where are we going? You know, what's keeping us back? That kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that if somebody wants to assign me some part of like these Figma screens, or like this part or this user flow, like do some research on this or create some screens on this or something like that. If someone wants to assign me something, I'd be happy to work on that. Uh, and if someone wants me to choose something for myself, I can also try and do that. I'm not sure if I'm in a place to be able to do that, but yeah, Figma stuff, happy to help. GitHub project board stuff, happy. So just hit me up.
Yes, awesome. Thank you for offering. So the way that I think it might work is that with like I mentioned earlier, last year we did this big exploration. We just somebody tackled screens, we changed designs. It was just wild. And I think with each of those milestones, and maybe with each feature development, or design will have something similar. There's like a phase where we have multiple people pulling it in different directions and coming up with ideas. And then out of all of those, we whittle it down to a single solution. When you whittle it down to that solution, that's where it's good when you have like a design lead or a design anchor who's in there very consistently. So I assume that'll be part of my job, is to just make sure it all comes together in the right way. And then when development happens, ideally you don't design anything anymore, but then design moves into a supporting role, like is available for testing things, for answering questions, to make tweaks if something comes up. So maybe we can think about that wherever we start something, we have multiple designers doing things, and then it goes into the refinement and implementation, and that's where it's it's a little bit less exciting because you're not really like experimenting and being playful, but it's more about making sure it gets integrated and developers have what they need. And maybe it's good if we agree with that process, then it's easier to know when it's a time to hop in and when it's time to hop out, and be okay with that, right? Where it doesn't having some structure, I guess, to the madness. How does that sound? Or have you noticed, is there a different workflow or something that you can recommend? I'm also curious to hear it from a developer side.
Sorry, can you rephrase that? I was mine was on how to get to next things, but rephrase your question.
Yeah. So for me, it's basically how do we involve a lot of developers, but
yeah,
at the right time, designers, but also at the right time, because
yeah, okay. So I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So the one hang up I think I have is like, is our navigation good? Do we have that defined? Because that's gonna be a basis for all of our screens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure we have that like basic navigation framework figured out. So then once you have that, then you can start to parallelize the screens, right? Because you have some kind of constraints for what each screen would look like. Something like that.
I think it is.
Yeah. So I've seen the tab layout, right?
Yeah.
That's still the plan?
That's the plan so far, but we it's not thoroughly, But and it's also very similar to stuff we've done in the guide.
Yeah.
And another application, the UI kit, also has a similar pattern, and that's been used in several projects. So I feel like we're pretty close there. But it's certainly something that we have to we really have to figure out and spec out, because it's a lot of overhead to navigate with all these subcontrollers and stuff. Especially how we handle modals, separate windows, in-app overlays, something like the approving or like the invoice request. There's stuff to figure out there.
So it seems like maybe there's a couple of like, because your layout here is actually really, really good. It's almost like from a high level, it looks mostly complete. Like I don't see anything obviously missing. So it's now we have to like get a little bit more fine grained on the requirements for each screen. So then you could kind of just assign each screen to whoever wants or whoever has time to start picking at it and laying out the components, right?
Yeah, and I'm also curious to hear from the dev side which ones are harder. There's usually some things that are hard and just need more time, and starting those early, like testing whether something's actually doable or so, because otherwise you might have to change stuff around later. So there's probably something that stands out as that needs to be done sooner than later for some type of priority setting.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I haven't thought about this in too much depth because I'm still focused on the stuff we're working on. But I think sending flow is going to be the most complex.
Yes, I would also say that because there are batch transactions involved as well, which in the current UI is crazy.
It's also going to be the hardest to design, right? So I don't see a huge disconnect with like if you look at it and it looks easy to design, it's probably going to be easy for us to implement as well. So I don't see anything that's too like disconnected. I could be missing some like overarching state of the wallet interface that makes this complex, but
on the other hand too, I have probably 20 or 30 wallets on my phone. I have there's so much other UI out there.
Right. Yes. That's great. We're definitely going to be leaning on prior art for this for sure. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big benefit of doing this now. A lot of people have figured out a lot of the problems already.
Yeah, there's some real nitty gritty stuff. Stain was bringing out the situation around where if the send max without the fees, or if you want to send it fast but you don't have enough to pay the fees for the fast transaction, you only have for the medium transaction, and just I don't know, there are all kinds of details you can, in edge cases you can consider, and that might be in the code that are not visible to us when we actually use it, but they were already considered, and in the UI already shows something in just those scenarios, but we'll never know if we just use it. We'd have to like dig through the code or so. I think that'd be indexing all the different states for the different screens. That would also be good. I mean, I was thinking something would be cool if we have this wireframe overview on a website somewhere, and you can click in, and then it shows you the specifications for each of those, like all the things it can do, what it can't do, different screen states. So you can really allows you to zoom in and out. And then ideally each feature has a thing where in progress, in development, in design.
And a question for Johnny as well, for the developers as well, is in terms of handover of those those screens, because like let's say there's 21 screens, which Christoph said it shouldn't take too long to put those together, but it is, I think, still quite a considerable amount of work. How do you guys like, if those screens are handed over to you, like, would you like them in like batches, and how would you see those batches? And also, I think same question for Christoph as well. Like, how would you see? Would you like the whole send flow of 8 screens handed over to you, and then you kind of just jam with that, or would you like half of the send flow, or how does that work for you guys?
We're going to do it in every way possible. No, I'm, really, if this is something that we want to have a very broad group of people to follow along and be okay with. So what I did years ago when I worked on Monero, and the developers, I showed the design to the developers, they're like, don't ask me, ask the community. And I thought, who's the community? Like Reddit. And then I posted my designs to Reddit, and I tried to think very carefully about how I do that. So what I ended up doing was a very specific format where I would first put, the way I worded it was very careful. Like, here's the goal, this is the problem, this is the goal, here's the background. Then I would share a video that explains it very, like 3 minutes, very briefly. There's a design, there's a prototype involved, so people could click through it. And there was a link to the design source files. So really creating a whole package that kind of from top to bottom takes you into it and through it. And that we can, in the end, also include in the design documentation. I think that would be, I would just recommend really going overboard with
a video,
different formats and just putting it out there. And then, of course, but that's different. There's a difference between having everyone follow along, and then for implementation specifically, where it's like, okay, this button is this size and this font is this size, and so that's where you don't want to necessarily think about. That's where you need to go deeper a little bit in the colors and layout logic and stuff.
It also feels like there's this other bucket that we also had with wallet scrutiny as well, which is the implementation part. So it's after implementation, it's those little things that are left hanging, like what's there. So it feels like also after each of these milestones, there's also going to be, okay, now it's implemented. Maybe we've done some testing, we found these problems through the testing, and then there comes another bucket underneath that of, these are all the small, fine little things to fine tune again to really bring it to where it needs to be. So it feels like there's the bigger milestones, then there's implementation, then there's, okay, now it's being implemented. What's wrong? What can we improve with the implementation?
The QA, testing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is another, once the QT replacement has happened, there was also discussion about whether this application gets released separately or along with core.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember what the final verdict on that one was, but that's something in the future. But I think for now we're fairly low key. We can have our own little releases. But yeah, ideally we would have a QA protocol. So let's say you Bitcoin Core.app, you can say test the latest release. Here are steps to go through to test. Import a wallet, do this. Set it to Signet, get some stuff from the faucet, send, all these things. That also helps us to ensure good quality.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, I should add that for prioritization, you probably do want to start with the onboarding part, so we can have something working so that we can tackle the rest of it. So there will be somewhat of an order to on the technical side as well. Like, we can't really do the receive stuff if you don't have a wallet set up, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be a bottleneck, onboarding and then the navigation, and then you could start to parallelize the rest of the features.
Yeah, totally. There's some stuff that's secondary or that can come later, for sure.
I was just thinking about in terms of actionable things, like, for me, if I try to see like, hey, I feel like something actionable, or like how would that look like? I was just thinking like, depending on how many resources we have, like, hate to use that word, but how many devs we have, how many designers we have, and like how many areas, like how many user flows or whatever we have. Like if we build a picture of that, it might like enable us to figure out how much parallelization can we actually do. Like, for example, like what I would love to do is that just like putting things out there, like just identify an area, like it can be onboarding, it can be send, it can be the multisig hardware wallet, the interface, whatever it is, and just like set me loose on that. I do I'll do user research if that's required. I'll create the screens. I'd love to work with like Johnny or Errol and like really interface, like, like on a very close basis, and make sure that issues are being like identified, designed for, fixed, like that. That would be something that seems to me like it could be actionable for me, that,
Yeah, I think the most actionable thing at this very moment is to figure out those milestones,
Yeah.
to do this planning and do it well, and then that afterwards we can all feel confident with what we want to do, in which order. We have clear goals, and we kind of figure out how we want to work together, and how we communicate. Like what you just mentioned is also a lot about communication and collaboration. How we want to go about that. And I think everyone also, no one is full time on this project, so we gotta have to be realistic, and we're in different time zones, so we cannot have everything, right? We have to work with those conditions.
So it feels like comment on that Google document in terms of those milestones, see if there's anything. So we can all just comment on that one, and then I guess we can kind of take it from there after we've all commented on this Google document.
Yeah, ideally next Wednesday when Errol's back, and he's had some time. Everyone has had left comments. We've had some back and forth in this document, some iteration. If Asto has a chance to chime in.
Yeah.
Ideally, we have our milestones basically figured out and can just talk about how to go about them.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for setting up that Google Doc. I think that's a great start.
Did you notice that document was started last year in April? It's been evolving. It was very different. I was like, I was going to start a new one, but I thought we had something, and a lot has changed since in that document and whatnot. But I don't know, not creating any extra digital waste there, just reusing things.
Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I think that's a good place to end it for now. I think tackling this Google Doc's a great idea, especially for our next meeting.
So I'll aim to comment in there before our next meeting as well. Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. You want to wrap up the recording? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for all for chipping in on this stuff. I'm excited for it. It gave me was really awesome to talk with the maintainers and feel like people are on board with this. We can make it happen. Now we can just focus and do the good work. And the wind's blowing in our direction a little bit. And Yashraj, let's make sure we tackle that question about audience and who's it for and how much we can just document that stuff somewhere. So we're confident with that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I have a bit of a framework in mind. I'm setting up a Google Doc. I'll set it up, share it with you, and maybe there are some useful things in that.
Awesome.
Just to note to stop the recording so we don't lose it.